Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays in Stores podcast, which you can find right here on the Court Store Media Network. I'm your host, Kanaye, and we got a big time matchup coming up this Friday night at the Garden, 8 p.m. prime time. Slick Rick Pitino, Dan Hurley, two guys who outwardly hate each other. They've both talked to an extent about how much they cannot stand losing to one another. Two of the biggest personalities in the sport, two of the greatest coaches to ever do it in college, and two ranked teams playing on Friday night in the Big East. Big Fox. I don't know how much more you can ask for as one, a Husky fan, and two, a Big East fan, a college basketball fan. These are the type of matchups that we circled on the calendar going into the season. Even though St. John's hasn't been as good as a lot of people, including myself and Josh, thought they were going to be going into the year, they were able to find themselves right back in the AP poll, ranked 22nd this week to UConn's third after UConn moved down from second, even though despite them not losing, Michigan jumped them in the poll. But hey, that is what it is there. But we got a big preview coming up for that Friday night matchup at MSG, as well as two big win recaps to get to. UConn took down Creighton in Omaha, Nebraska, a place that has been very, very unkind to them over the past couple years during Dan Hurley's tenure at UConn. Of course, outside of the Leah McNeely 38-point performance that led to a win last season, and of course this game the last Saturday night. And then this past Tuesday night, UConn was also able to take down Xavier in what was an absolute rout by over 30 points in People's Bank Arena in Hartford. So two recaps to come as well before we get into the preview for St. John's. Again, super pumped for that Friday night game. I mean, this is, again, what more can you ask for from a Big East fan, a UConn fan perspective? But before we get into everything that I'm going to hit on today, everyone knows how important the algorithm is on YouTube. It gets more people to see the videos that me and Josh put out on this channel. So please just do anything you can to engage with the content we put out, whether it's liking, subscribing, or telling other people about the Court Store. At the end of the day, everything goes a really long way, with just, again, influencing YouTube's algorithm and getting more people to see our videos. Also, be sure to turn on post notifications so you are the first to see our latest content. So let's get right into it. We'll start with the Creighton game. UConn won 85-58 in Omaha, Nebraska at Chi Health Center. Again, I've talked about it pretty far length on this podcast about how that arena has been very unkind to the Huskies over the years. But back-to-back years now, UConn went into Omaha and won. This game really was arguably the best 40 minutes that we've seen this program play this year, I believe. I mean, between this game and the Xavier game, I really do feel that the offense is trending in the right direction. We've talked about it on this podcast where UConn needs to get back into that top 20 offensively where they were to start the season, just because we all know the famous stat that there's only been one national champion since they started tracking adjusted defensive and offensive efficiencies on KenPom to win the national championship while being outside the top 20 in offense and defense. And that was the 2014 Huskies, who were outside the top 20 offensively, but we're in it defensively. This year, very similar to that. UConn stands right now 5th defensively in the country on KenPom and 25th offensively now. So they're right on the cusp of it. Just in terms of the offensive performance, we need a couple more games out of them, similar to what we saw against Creighton and against Xavier and against Providence as well. While the defense wasn't great against Providence, I do think the offense was pretty solid for the most part in that matchup. But to get into the actual game, really early on, I was worried because Creighton was just making some tough shots. You know, this Creighton program I talked about on last week's episode, they've definitely disappointed me. I do want to give Greg McDermott the benefit of the doubt because he is in a little bit of a new situation where he's bringing in a truly completely new roster. Max McAndrews, who did not play this game, is one of the lone returners for the Blue Jays this season. Of course, they still have guys like Fedor Zugic, as well as Isaac Trout, Shane Thomas as well. But really a lot of the guys that McDermott was able to pull out of the portal have not really been what I think a lot of people, including myself, thought they were going to be. Nick Graves was by far the best player for the Blue Jays in this game. He finished with 17 points. And listen, you give Creighton early credit for how they played in the first 10 minutes of the game, but UConn really was just able to get it going. They turned up the defensive tenacity and the toughness meter, and I think it went to show how UConn was able to spring out to the lead that they ultimately did. I mean, they led by what I believe was close to 40 at one point in this game, and the offense was pedal to the metal throughout the entire night. The star of the show was Braylon Mullins. He had 16 points, 4 for 8 from 3, 6 for 13 overall. He got it going very early in the game. Solo ball hit a couple threes early in the game as well, but overall still kind of not there in terms of the solo ball breakout performance that we're all waiting for, or at least hoping to repeat itself after what we saw against Nova, where it seemed like he was getting back on the right track. Hopefully that's come on Friday night. I think Solo Ball is a big game player. We saw how he played in the Garden against Illinois and as well as Florida. So I'm hoping he can replicate the performances he had in both of those games. Silas Demery Jr., I think, was by far the unsung hero of this game. 15 points, 3 for 4 from three. I need to mention this because I don't think it's getting enough attention in the national landscape where he is shooting above 45% from three in Big East play. For the season overall. And in Big East play, he's shooting close to 55%, if I'm not mistaken, from three. It's incredible the jump he's made offensively, especially in the scoring column, since he's kind of made that leap in the Providence game in Friartown, where UConn was able to come back and win in overtime. And I mean, really just an all-around player. It's just so Tristan Newton and some of the box scores he's been putting up lately. 6 rebounds, 5 assists in this game. He did turn the ball over 3 times, so it's definitely something you'd like to see get reduced going forward. And I mean, it was a little bit of an outlier in the turnover column for Silas. He usually does not turn the ball over all too much. AK was able to get back on track after his rough game against Providence, as well as some of the games leading up to that as well, where he just kind of struggled a little bit. He was 5 for 9 overall from the field, banged 2 threes home, 6 rebounds. I believe 5 of them were offensive rebounds as well, where he was able to crash the glass while UConn had possession, 2 assists, stealing a block. I mean, doing the Alex Caravan thing where you can just play off others and be the best version of himself as a Husky. And I think you got good minutes of guys off the bench. It was super encouraging seeing Jaden Ross, who's definitely struggled, I think, since he's had that little bit of a hamstring injury dating back a couple weeks now, where he hasn't really been able to find consistent minutes on the floor as well as consistency in the shot from beyond the arc. He went 2 for 2 in this game. Of course, one of those threes came in garbage time, but nonetheless seeing the confidence to, 1, to see him let it fly, and 2, to see it go down. Definitely great to see. I believe he also knocked down 1 or 2 3. I will get to that one when we get to the Xavier recap. Good seeing Jay Ross on the floor. I thought he was impactful in the minutes that he played defensively. You know what he brings to the table. Jalen Stewart impressed me in this game too. He finished with 7 points. I was able to knock down a 3. Had 2 nice mid-range jumpers too. Just Jalen Stewart having games where both him and Jay Ross play well, I think is going to take this team to another level and surely help the offense as we saw in this game. But I mean, again, it really came down to the defense they played and just how offensively they were able to get it going. I mean, that's been a big thing this year. I think that they've been able to get the shots that they want, and they have the talent, they have the offensive firepower, the personnel on this roster. You see it on paper, and you know they should be better offensive team than what they have been to start the year. And I think it all just came together against Creighton, where you got the shots you wanted, and this time you actually made them, as opposed to the games we've seen this year where the offense kind of get run stagnant when guys just can't hit shots. A lot of that is attributed to Solo Ball just kind of not being the shooter he was last year, and I still think that hopefully he is going to get to that point. I still firmly believe that Solo Ball is very, very crucial how far this team can go, and I definitely believe that he's going to get there at some point this year, and maybe that's Friday night. Braylon Mullins, of course, time in and out of the lineup. Terrace Reed, time in and out of the lineup. Terrace in this game only played 21 minutes because he had the foul trouble, but Eric Ribe, I thought, was did a good job in the minutes he played. Between the two centers, they shot 100% from the floor. And I believe between this game and the Xavier game, they are 19 for 20 combined. So that just shows you how efficient the two centers for this UConn program have been this year. And I think overall, that takes care of what I had to say about this Creighton game. Again, really good getting this win in a place that's been very unkind to UConn over the years. But that leads me into the Xavier recap, where UConn won 92-60. Again, really absolute rout from start, really. I mean, UConn jumped out to the 10-0 lead. That was the kill shot, and UConn never looked back from there. I believe I forget what their biggest lead of this game was. But UConn, I mean, again, the offense showed up. Silas Demery Jr. was my player of the game. He finished with 17 points on 6 for 9 from the floor, 3 for 5 from 3. He had 8 assists, 4 rebounds, 4. He did turn the ball over 4 times, which is definitely something that is a little bit of an outlier type of performance from Silas, where we're hoping that this doesn't continue to persist, because St. John's is a pretty solid defensive team. So, Rick Pitino likes to run that zone press that encourages burning time off the shot clock and forcing you to kind of be in scramble mode once you get into offense. So you hope that Silas isn't in a position where he is turning the ball over. But he added 2 steals on top of that, and Silas really from start to finish was able to get it going. I believe he started 3 for 3 from 3 in the game. I mean, early on, he was able to hit 2 threes and was able to get to the line, converted on an and one. He was able to get downhill and have a nice dunk, and just the job he did finding the open man. Really, I think Silas has been more, up to this point, Silas has been more than you could have asked of him, I think. at this point in the season, considering where do you think back to where Tristan Newton was at this point of his first year in STORRS, then I think the argument could be made that Silas is further along than where T. New was. And I mean, I think when you look at Silas's full season stats, they are very similar to what T. New's was his first year. So he's definitely on that path to hopefully being the player that Tristan was once he made that jump going into the NCAA tournament, where he, of course, was arguably UConn's best player on the floor that entire postseason run and came back and was the best point guard in the country the next season. Braylon Mullins, let's talk about him. 13 points in this game. He jumped out to really the 10-0 lead that UConn started off of was really on the shoulders of Braylon Mullins. He hit a 3 early on, converted on and one, sprang out and had 2 dunks in transition. Braylon, just killer instinct. It's good to see. I think overall, what definitely is encouraging to me is seeing UConn in a position where they're in these blowout games and they can afford to rest their starters for some more time than what they have been able to were in past games. I mean, the Villanova game, Alex Caravan plays 38 minutes. Silas Demery is above 30 minutes. Solo Ball is playing 30 minutes. And I think, as the season wears on, I understand the Big East isn't as good this year as it has been in the past, but these games are physical. They're grueling. They wear down on you. And I think it's so invaluable to be able to have time to rest your starters and rest your key pieces. And this game was a perfect example of that to prepare for the big matchup on Friday night against the Johnnies. AK struggled in this game a little bit from 3. He was not able to knock down any of his 3 attempts, but 9 points overall, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. Shows you how he doesn't have to score to be impactful necessarily. I think that just, again, being able to play off others, being able to read what he's getting off the sets that UConn runs, I think it's so impactful. And it's going to be tough to replace AK once he graduates, man. I don't know how the coaching staff is going to overcome the roadblock that is going to be the loss of Alex Caravan once he does end up finishing the season out. Terrace Reed in this game, 14 points. I thought he was dominant, 14 and 8. Again, I mentioned the efficiency from both him and Eric Ryba. Eric Ryba had 14 points in this game as well and only missed 1 shot, went 5 for 6. Between those 2 guys, you have 2 certified studs at center, and that just brings so much comfort to, I'm sure, the coaching staff, the rest of the players on the team, and of course the fans, just knowing that you have 2 viable options at center, where last year you never really knew what you were going to get out of Terrace. You never knew what you were going to get out of Sampson. And there's, of course, the argument to be made that Terrace should have been starting over Sampson last year. But nonetheless, this year, what you have at center. What you have at point with Silas. And then Braylon, he's continued to play well. I'm honestly really impressed with how he's came back from the concussion. That's a thing that's not easy to come back from. We saw how AK struggled after suffering the concussion in the game against Dayton and Maui last year, and how he never really got back to form. And I think that definitely got to his head, mixed with the NBA draft stuff. So really a lot of credit goes to Braylon for, not forcing the issue and going too crazy, putting too much on himself after suffering that concussion. And again, I was really shocked when I saw that he was going to play against Creighton before tip and played a hell of a ball game, against Xavier as well. Now, the bench, I thought the bench was really good in this game. Jay Ross, like I mentioned, he had another stellar performance shooting from beyond the arc and banging home 3 3-pointers in this game, was 4 for 6 overall, 11 points. Added 2 rebounds, 2 assists. Just great seeing Jay Ross contribute in a meaningful way. I mentioned Eric Ryba with the 14 points off the bench. Jalen Stewart, a little bit of a tougher game from him, but I liked what he was able to do and just defending at a high level. He had 1 nice pass. I forget exactly who it was to and at what point in the game it was, but there was a great find by Stewie there. Malachi was not great in either of these games, but I do think that, Silas has been so good. It's tough to take him off the floor. Tough for Mally to get in a rhythm when Silas is playing so often, which, of course, there's going to be a game in March where Mally wins UConn a game. I definitely believe that what he provides for this program and him committing to UConn is just – it's one of the more underrated transfer portal acquisitions of around the country this season. And I think Mally is going to continue to play a crucial role off the bench, and he's going to have some more moments like he did against Providence and like he did against Illinois earlier this year. But again, really just defensively with the job they did, they held Xavier to what I believe was 22 points in the first half. UConn scored 50 in the first half, so that's great to see from an offensive metric perspective and standpoint. And then just not taking the foot off the glass, putting up an additional 42 points and still keeping the foot down on Xavier's neck in this game, I thought was good job overall from the Huskies in this one, and good taking home this win. But let's get into the big game preview on Big Fox against Rick Pitino's St. John's Red Storm. I'm super pumped for this game. I mean, I don't know if really you could describe just how much of the season has really built up to this moment. Of course, going into the year, both these teams were ranked in the top 10 in the Associated Press preseason poll. And now that we've kind of figured out where both these programs stack up in the national landscape, it's maybe not as marquee of a matchup as a lot of people, including myself and Josh, thought it was going to be going into the season. Now, I definitely thought going into the year this was more than likely going to be a top 10 matchup, and that's just not the case right now. UConn is ranked third by the Associated Press in the country, and St. John's is ranked 22nd. Of course, St. John's fell out of the poll after their rough out-of-conference stretch, as well as their loss to Providence in what I believe was their first game of the Big East regular season, or second game. But they suffered a tough loss with a blue lead to Providence at Madison Square Garden. And, I really at that moment, I thought they were dead in the water, but Rick Pitino seemed to have figured out his rotations, his lineups that he wants to play at given points of the game. It seems like he's figured it out, and the Giants have been able to spring off 8 straight wins in a row. UConn is obviously on an 18-game winning streak, and they're obviously chasing to win out in Big East play. I think there is a very real possibility that they lose. But I don't want to look ahead and say that UConn is going to go undefeated in conference play. I just think it's something you take one game at a time, starting with Friday. Of course, the crowd should be a pretty split crowd where, maybe 60-40 in favor of the Johnnies, but I think it could get damn near close to 50-50 in terms of the Johnnies fans and UConn fans in attendance. I know Big Red will be there. If you're a UConn fan, I'm sure you're more than familiar with who Big Red is, so definitely look out for him. See the UConn chants hopefully break out at several points of the game. But I'm really excited for this game because I think Rick Pitino has played Dan Hurley and the Huskies program tougher than any coach across the country since UConn kind of began this run that it's been on over the course of the last 4 seasons now, dating back to the back-to-back national championship teams where Rick Pitino wasn't coach at St. John's just yet. But the following year in 23-24, St. John's played UConn tougher than any team across the country outside of perhaps Alabama. Every game that UConn played with St. John's was very close, and I know that the final scores of some of those games weren't really telling of how exactly close those games were. When UConn played St. John's at the XL that year, single-digit game, when they went to MSG. The game was very close. Cam, Steph Castle, they had some big games. They were ultimately able to pull away and win by double digits. But again, it wasn't telling of how close that game was. In the Big East tournament in the semifinal, UConn plays St. John's, 5-point game. That game was wire to wire. UConn felt like they were going to be able to pull away at many different points of the game, and St. John's just kept hanging around thanks to Danis Jenkins, Joel Soriano. That just goes you to show how Rick Pitino doesn't need the most talented players to be able to keep it close with UConn. And this year he has a talent. This is, the reason he went into the portal and spent the money he did. He got guys like Ian Jackson, Dylan Mitchell, Bryce Hopkins, Josan Sanan to be able to be prepared for matchups like he is going to be getting with Dan Hurley and the Huskies on Friday night. And from the St. John's angle, it's definitely not been the season that I think a lot of those people in that fan base have hoped for. I definitely think that they would be in a position where they felt that they were more so of a firm national championship contender. Of course, right now that doesn't really look like it's the case, but it's still a very tough team that's seemed to be playing the right brand of basketball as of late. They've defended at a much higher level than they were to start the year, especially at Players Era Tournament where Rick Pitino called out a lot of the players on this roster, said they just have no toughness, they need to defend, and they're not defending it. I think since then, they've done a lot better of a job. Of course, everyone, including myself, has pointed to point guard issues the entire year. Pitino brought in Ian Jackson in hopes of being able to convert him to being a viable option at the point. And let's just call it for what it is. Ian Jackson is the point guard, but now he's been playing a role that he's much more comfortable with, and being a microwave scorer, someone who can play out on the wing at the 2 guard, at the 3 guard, and really just give the ball to, he can break guys down off the dribble and get a bucket. Osiah Sellers, I think, has done a fine job kind of handling the quote-unquote point guard duties in the starting lineup for the Johnnies. But Dylan Darling, I think, has been one of the most impactful players for the St. John's roster this year, where he comes off the bench and he's tough as nails. Played in the Big Sky last year and was the player of the year at Idaho State, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a guy, I mean, he can get hot and he can knock down threes and bunches. He's a dog defensively. I am really curious to see how Dylan Darling handles what I would assume is the assignment of Silas Demery or Malachi Smith whenever either of those guys is on the floor. And I'm interested to see how these teams match up defensively, because me and Josh, prior to recording our episode, which went on Court Storm podcast this past week, we were trying to map out how we felt that UConn and St. John's were going to match up with each other. Of course, Terrace Reed and Zuby Ejiofor will take each other as an assignment. Now, Rick Pitino's shifted his starting lineup game in, game out. Most recently, though, he has had Dylan Mitchell and Bryce Hopkins starting alongside one another, with Zuby, along with Ian Jackson and Uzziah Sellers. So I would expect that to be the lineup that rolls out on Friday night against UConn. Now, of course, Terrace takes Zuby. I'm really interested to see whether Caravan takes the Dylan Mitchell assignment, because I do think that is going to pose some problems for Caravan offensively, where honestly, I think either Hopkins or Mitchell could definitely pose some problems for AK, just because I think that AK tends to thrive more when he has more natural bigs, natural four-man guarding him, as opposed to more athletic three-men, more athletic wings, which is what both Hopkins and Mitchell are. They're guys who are going to be able to probably do a fair job in chasing AK around screens. I definitely know Dylan Mitchell is capable of that. Bryce Hopkins, I think he can do probably a fine job when tasked with having to chase AK around. I think that could cause some problems for UConn offensively and how they want to be able to run their offense, be able to execute the sets that they run as well. Now, I have heard rumors that Dylan Mitchell could potentially open up and be guarding Silas Demery Jr., which is definitely something that I am slightly concerned with as well, just because Dylan Mitchell, he moves so well. He's going to be able to move with AK. I think he's going to be able to help, for the most part, stay in front of Silas. And Dylan Mitchell, I mean, he's a legit 6'7". I think he has a little bit of weight on Silas as well. And Silas, he's not short for a point guard, but when you're matched up with an athletic wing with the size that Dylan Mitchell possesses, then it's going to be a tough matchup offensively for Silas. I definitely believe that he can get around it. I think he's going to have to look to take it to the basket and be aggressive, get to the line, draw a lot of fouls, try to hit some of the outside shots to pull Mitchell out of the paint, pull Zuby out of the paint. It's going to be a big theme for UConn in this game. The shooters got to make shots so that they're able to pull guys like Mitchell and Hopkins and Zuby out of the painted area, so they can open up driving lanes. And then also they're able to kick out to shooters who can hopefully hit at a high clip on Friday night. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where the matchups occur between Caravan, Silas, and who is defending one another, as well as which players on the Johnnies that both those players will be guarding. I would think Caravan probably either takes Hopkins or Mitchell. I think Silas, there's a real potential that he guards either Hopkins or Ian Jackson. I think if I were Dan Hurley, the defensive lineup I would roll out is Terrace on Zuby. I would ask Caravan to take Dylan Mitchell, which slightly does concern me just because of the athletic edge Dylan Mitchell has. I would ask Silas Demery to take Bryce Hopkins, Braylon Mullins to guard Ian Jackson, because I feel like Braylon has defended very well lately, and I think he's going to be able to stay in front of Ian if he is tapped in on that end of the floor. And then I would ask Solo Ball to chase Uzziah Sellers, who is probably their best shooter. I would ask him chase him over the three-point line or over the top of screens and try to chase him off the three-point line, I should say there. But of course, the coaching staff, Dan Hurley, Luke Murray, Kamani Young, they know much, much better than I do. Mike Nardi, I'll add to that. So I'm going to be curious to see that. I think this game is going to be a really, really unique matchup for both teams and how they line up defensively. And offensively, I mean, I think you need to take advantage of the lapses that the Johnnies have defensively at times. I think they look a little disconnected and at points of their games, and I do think that they are very reliant on having Zuby Ejiofor as a last line of defense. So I think you can take advantage of that. That's going to be massive in that game. Terrace Reed, I would like to see him establish himself down low early, as he has been doing in the past couple games, the 3-4 game sample size that you want to go off of the recent matchups the Huskies have played. And let me tell you, that matchup should be stellar. Zuby Ejiofor, Terrace Reed, I think they're both top 3 centers in the sport. So I'm super excited to see that matchup down low in the painted area. The guard play, I mean, you want shot making, you're hopefully going to get in this game. Ian Jackson, again, he can hit shots off the dribble. Sanan can come off the bench and hit shots when he has it going. Uzziah Sellers is a legit threat from deep. with how UConn's been playing offensively, Braylon Mullins, you got to chase him everywhere. You can't give him an inch of space. Solo ball, hopefully this is the game where he gets going. I think a lot of emphasis is going to be placed on chasing Braylon Mullins with how well he shot the basketball as of late. I hope that's going to open up things for Solo. Even if he isn't knocking it down from three, I think he's going to be able to get into that mid-range 15 to 17 footer that he seems to love so much around the elbows, as well as hopefully getting direct straight line drives to the cup. And then, Caravan, who looked to be the connecting piece, and Silas Demery, I think is going to be huge. He's got to win that matchup at point guard. Yeah, I think he has to. And I fully expect him to come out with his best stuff. I think he's a big game player. We saw what he did against BYU. We saw what he did in Friartown against Providence. And this atmosphere on Friday night should be absolutely electric. I'm envious of everyone who is going to be at the game. I wish I could go. But nonetheless, I will be thoroughly enjoying it, watching it from my couch on Friday night. But overall, I think it's going to take care of everything I have for you guys on this episode. Really, just again, I'm so excited for this matchup with the Johnnies. Glad we're getting it twice, hopefully 3 times this year in the Big East Tournament Championship as well. This is going to be very important for Big East Tournament seeding and Big East Championship aspirations, as St. John's is only 1 game behind UConn in the Big East standings currently. St. John's only lost 1 game in conference play, as I mentioned, to Providence earlier at the start of conference play. UConn has yet to lose a game, but this could very well be it. I think there's going to be good to take away, even if UConn does lose this game, as long as the defense is tough throughout the duration of the game and the offense seems to continue to trend upwards in the right direction, as we all know that UConn definitely needs to increase their output in that metric. But again, excited for the Huskies. Should be a great game. Going to love seeing the antics that we see from both Dan Hurley and Rick Pitino on the sidelines at MSG on Big Fox on Friday night. But until next episode, I'll see you all next time.